One of the reasons why I write code in n8n is because I want to generate a random number. This could easily be a custom node. So let's build it together. But first, let's see why would you need a random number generator. In production, I have a random code node that just generates a random number, and with a switch, it generates a video, and on each chat GPT, I message the AI with a random prompt. It could be bouldering, cadastry, construction, and that gets uploaded to YouTube. It's basically a YouTube channel on autopilot. In other flows, I'm actually generating a random number to pick a random item from a list of items that are generated by an API request. So generating a random number is something that I need often, actually, and it's not something that is supported natively. Now, what you're gonna learn here today is how to create your own nodes. And here I created something that can generate numbers. You have a couple operation as random integer, random float, multiple random numbers. And if you select this one, you put from 0 to 100 on only 5 items, you can create whatever random number. And if you only create 5 unique numbers, it's the same series, and it's only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 5. So there is actually 6. If you go to 5, it's better. And it's the same series that is getting generated. This is really good if you have an API request that returns 5 items, but you don't want to process the items straight. You want to randomize how you process the items. Then you can also add a split. And now you have 5 items that are randomly generated, and you can loop through them. And that's something that you could not do before. It would require a code loop. Now you can 100% go in no code. But how does this work internally? So I've built this repo that you can download. I will share the GitHub repo in the description. But basically, you can do pnpm start to start your stack. It starts Docker and watches on file change. So now if you reload, it reloads the Docker. That's why you have a downtime. But if you go back to the code base, you can see that you have a couple files. So we'll go through one. So you have the Docker compose that attach volumes to your local environment. This is just for development purposes, but the Docker file is what's being used to deploy into production. We'll do this at the end. Gulp allows you to compile all your files in nodes here and put that into dist nodes that will be used internally by the final command to deploy. And then you have the package.json when we add all the dev dependencies and couple scripts. We use pnpm here, which is a different node package manager, and everything is documented in the README if you need some help. But let's go back to a random code generator, a number generator, and see how it works, the code. So in our case, we're importing from n8n workflows. This is where we got all the interfaces that allow us to have internal documentation on how to build this. We have the random in generator, random flow generator, and multiple random generator. This is the functions that you could imagine when you were using the workflow. Then what you do is that you need to export a class that has an async execute function. And it's important that it implements inode type, which forces the description and the function execute. The description follows this, and if you have a question in TypeScript, you can double click in type definition, and you see all the things that you can use in this interface. In our case, it's a description that is mandatory, and that's the thing that displays the right name. So here, if I replace XXX here in the script name and I save, what happens in the command line is that the Docker gets restarted because it follows the files. And now if I go here and reload and go to my random number generator, now I have XX. So let's explain real quick what are those. So the display name is the display name that you have on the nodes, and then you have the properties, and the properties have display name, type, and you can show those depending. So you have display option, show operation, multiple random, and that's the name of this option, which is the operation. So yeah, to follow this tutorial, you need to know a little bit about programming. That's not something that you can do without, but if you use Cloud Code, you can use this base repo to create the node that you need. Another thing that you can do is you can add if it's required or not. And in this case, minimum and maximum are present no matter the type of operation. So if I go back in the UI and I select from a range, a float, or a random, minimum is always present, but it also needs to handle errors. So if I click here, you can see that the maximum value cannot be greater. And actually, if we look at our code, this is what happens. You have in the execute function a step that validates the parameters. But how can we find that this node exists or this function exists? So for this, you can see into this, and this is an iExecute function, which is an interface. If you go into the definition of it, you can see that you can get the many things, the input data, the node's input, and you can also know what they return with the type. In our case, what we do is just a switch. When we have the operation type, we execute the right function with the right node parameters. And that's why it's very important that we show the right node parameters for the right operation. And then in our new item, we append any return data, and we return at the end a list of return data. And that's basically it. You can download the repo and check on your own how this works. So if I go back here, I already removed this, but we can try to do it on another level. If I put hello here on the name, on the type of operation, I reload, this does not work anymore normally. Oh, already accessible. If I do random number generator, here you can see that it renames your node. So this is a great way to, in local, develop your nodes, and then you can package that into your own n8n private instance and deploy them, or you can choose to deploy that code, but we'll do that in another video if we want to deploy it in the community. Now, here we're using Kamal to deploy. Basically, it's a script that will bundle in local your image, put it into GitHub repos in your Docker directory, then it would SSH into the server, download the image, and run everything with a proxy, making sure that the traffic that goes in finish going into the previous container and then switches to the new container. It's like Kubernetes, but only what you need, not the complexity that you will need at scale. In my opinion, this is better than just Docker Compose because you have the secret handling and you own everything on your local. You don't have to SSH manually. There is a script that is tested that will do it for you. So this is what we do here. We build a first stage using Node that will use pnpm to build the packages and so on, and then inherit from Docker n8n latest to copy all the files from our custom nodes. Make sure that we go back to our node user because this is what n8n is using internally, and then we expose the right variable, and in our configuration deploy, we just need to give the IP of the server and make sure that our current user in our local machine can SSH to that server. Here I deploy in custom n8n custom Ronald Lopez software. You can go to that if you want to contact me. And if you want your n8n instance to use Postgres instead of SQLite, you can uncomment this and make sure that in your secrets you are setting the right variables. You can use 1Password here or LastPass as a password manager, but we'll see that in another Kamal deploy video. Here in our case, I just need the host, which is n8n custom, just for the purpose of this video. Just to show you the setup, I'll just use Droplet from DigitalOcean and just take the cheapest one. Let's take one in London, Ubuntu, basic plan, regular, and let's take something just for the tutorial, 1 GB of CPU, of RAM. No volume, no nothing. I'm gonna select all my SSH, no managed database, no nothing, just something extremely simple, and we are ready to create the Droplet. This will give us an IP address that we can use later. Our Droplet is alive. We can copy this IP address. Here I'm gonna put it and save it in my domain from DNS Cloud. Saved. I can go back to Clip Archive, Organization, and just add a domain. Here I'm putting my domain to that Droplet so that we have the right hostname declared, and now everything is hooked up. The last thing that we need is make sure we can SSH to it, and now you can see that I can SSH. So if I can SSH, Kamal will be able to SSH. Now the thing that we need here is to replace the web server and the database host by our IP. So we're not using that, but just for best practices, I'm just going to put it here. We don't need the secrets either, and we should be ready to go. Make sure that we're not committing random stuff. Let's remove hello from here. Let's commit the configuration file. And now what we can do is Kamal deploy, because it's Kamal setup. The difference between Kamal deploy and Kamal setup is in the setup, we need to go into our node and install Docker and all the dependencies so that it can host our application, and then we'll be able to pull the image. So you see it asks me the SSH key, so that it's able to SSH into our IP. It checks that Docker does not exist, so it installs Docker in our host machine, and now it starts building the image of Docker with all our code in local. Now I start to log in the machine and pull the image from our registry in Docker and start the container in our host machine. And that's it. Now everything is running. We can check by SSHing into our host machine, and you can see that we have our proxy that allows to make sure the traffic is rerouted with the right domains and so on to our container, and the container is running here. This is really important because it allows to deploy versions of your node safely, and on top of that you have your volumes, so things are getting managed in a way better way. So now let's exit our VM, and if I go into rolandsoftware.com with the right subdomain, it should go to n8n. Now let's put fake data here. I'm gonna put my real email actually, so you guys can reach out to me if you want. Here I'm just gonna put a random password because anyways I'm gonna delete this instance and this VM and this IP. Just put whatever things in that form. I've done this so many times. No, skip. And now we can start from scratch. Click here, trigger manual, and check our random number generator, which is in production. So now we can create nodes on our local, test them, and then deploy that into the community node. A small exercise for you, if you want to learn how to do more, you can go into our repository and check on credentials, and I show you how to do a special credential API here. That's already installed and compiled, so if you go into save, personal work, credentials, and create credentials, you can have example API credentials, which is the one that we created. So we have API key, you have this one. So now you know how to create your own credentials and your own flows. And that's it. I would leave the code in the description and enjoy it. Have a fun coding. Again, if you have Cloud Code, I think this base repo can be really good for you to start understanding how to create your own nodes, but be careful, like you can do a lot without having to code your own nodes. I would say that this is great if you have a tool and you want to start to integrate into n8n. This allows you to really test and understand what things you want to do.